Appreciate it again, Kim. I've been to a few of these already. I don't know how many other people in the audience have done Kim's conferences. To me, the panel is the best part of the day, in my opinion. Today, we've got a fantastic group that we're going to be talking about some pretty cool stuff. Kim, don't kill us. We've changed everything you asked us to talk about to something else. I'm the managing director of security advocacy at Lenovo. I said it enough during the keynote, but I wanted to kind of pass the mic over to the esteemed panel because these are some who's of CISOs and senior leaders, and I think we're going to have a fantastic discussion. Dan, you want to kick it off?
Sure, thanks. There we go. Dan Bowden, I'm the CISO for Marsh. Marsh is a global risk advisory and insurance brokerage.
Vince Romney, I own the InfoSec practice at Nuskin Pharmanex, a direct selling agency down in Provo, Utah.
I'm Steve Gentry, and I don't work anywhere. I actually decided to take a break here recently, and so I'm a three-time CISO, spent last 13 years at 4 different SaaS companies, and now I'm trying to get some of my sanity back before it's completely gone.
That's a tough act to follow. My mic is not working. There we go. It's definitely a tough act to follow. I'm Jami Hughes. I'm Deputy CISO at Zions Bancorp.
Jeff Kaden. I'm the CISO at Clearsense, which is a healthcare data analytics and archival system.
Awesome, thanks. So we kind of had a pre-meeting and discussed some things that, us as security leaders in organizations we're kind of grappling with as of late. Some of this stuff will probably make you cringe when the topic comes up. We're going to talk about AI at some point, unfortunately, in my opinion, but we're going to talk about it because it is something that we need to acknowledge. We're going to kind of take an approach to look at this from a business perspective. I think in our discussions, we all sort of come from diverse organizations, much different missions, much different constructs in terms of how those companies and organizations are organized. I think from the standpoint of security organization, I'll just kind of kick it off and kind of share my insight and what my thoughts are coming from Lenovo's perspective. We're a global multinational company, 80,000 employees globally. We've got a massive security organization that's comprised of numerous functions. The way we've done it is we've named a chief security officer who is the senior most executive in the company. He reports to our CEO directly. He reports into the board of directors through the audit committee, which I think is actually the perfect mix in my professional opinion, and I'm interested to hear everyone else's thoughts on that. But we have security functions that span the gamut, and our CSO, being that senior security leader, is the person that has the ultimate responsibility from the standpoint of, I'm not going to say managing risk, but taking risk to risk acceptance authorities. And he does that in pretty much on a daily basis. We have security functions that span from infrastructure security, which is our CISO and his team. They report directly to the CSO. We have a physical security leader who reports directly to our CSO, so we're running what I call a converged security organization. Business continuity kind of falls into that mix a little bit as well. We have a massive product security effort that is actually dotted lined into the CSO that essentially we have security leaders, chief product security officers in our 4 main business units that are driving those product security efforts from the standpoint of we drive the standards, the policies down into the dev teams. Dev teams have to adhere to these policies. And then we've got security development life cycles and all that kind of stuff that kind of goes along with that in terms of checks and balances and ensuring we have security champions that are out there doing the right things from a software security perspective, hardware, firmware, BIOS, cloud. We even just stood up a Linux security reboard as well. So lots of moving parts there. That's dotted line from a governance perspective where it ties into the CSO at an executive level in terms of a governance body that we have that meets weekly. Supply chain security is sort of in the same boat, dotted line. We have a leader that sits in our global supply chain that's driving those efforts in terms of supply chain security, risk, continuity, ultimately resilience. And then data privacy, we're tied at the hip with our data privacy team. They're doing reviews just like our product security teams are as we iterate products and services. data privacy teams looking at things from a privacy perspective in the 180 markets that we operate in. Again, it's a risk-based approach. Again, there's checks and balances in there. Again, we try not to push or delegate risk down as far as some other companies that I've heard, but I think we've got a good mix from that perspective. So that said, I kind of want to focus on that with the board. I mean, I'll just open it up. Whoever wants to kind of kick it off first, just kind of give us an idea of sort of your thoughts on how what I outlined or kind of what's different in your organizations, and we'll just kind of go from there.
I got the mic, so I'll kick it off. We have a similar model, and we do report up through the risk committee. So InfoSec goes straight to the board of directors risk committee, and that's how we report up through to the board. One thing I would say is that you've got a very mature, enormous organization. We're about a tenth the size, and trying to follow those same principles, but much less complexity. And with that, we find a lot more convergence of our teams. So a lot of our teams are multifaceted. So architecture and engineering are the same group, because we just don't have the discipline to split that out. Privacy GRC, okay, same group. SOC and vuln management, same group. It's just a team of guys. That group of people does that job. So organizationally, I think you try to follow those lines, but I would say for our perspective, that contact with the board is critical. That ability to be one-on-one conversation with the board chair in charge of the risk committee is critical to our success, and we didn't have that when I first got here. It took some time to develop that relationship, and I'll talk to the concept of alignment later, but until you get that kind of relationship, it's a lot harder to push that agenda.
So we're an even smaller organization than Nuskin Pharmanex, and so I reported to the CFO, and that's a fun conversation of having to convince the money person why technology can matter. At times you're like, no, we really do need to do a hardware refresh. And it has nothing to do with security. It has everything to do with if you don't have a culture of doing hardware refreshes, they will go to companies, because especially when you're a SaaS company, the developers want their new laptop every 3 years. And he just was like, wait, we can just get rid of it. It's okay. No one will notice. Fantastic. I'll let you send that out to the company, because I'm sure as hell it's not going to do it. The reason he tried to put it on me is I had security, privacy, and IT that were all my direct reports. So our chief privacy officer, our CIO, and then a CISO reported to me as the chief security officer. And it's just, that's very common for SaaS companies. And nowadays it's about 35% of all SaaS companies in particular, about 35% of all CISOs actually have IT nowadays. It's one of the new things, but one of the worst trends that's happening is we went from 8% of CISOs reporting to the CEO to this last year we're down to 5%. And so we're trending in the wrong direction. But yeah, it's very common. I also meet with the board on a quarterly basis, particularly the audit committee. I've got my own set of metrics that I'm reporting there. When the audit committee was formed, they sent me a deck that they wanted to have shared out, and I laughed. And I said, no chance in hell I'm ever going to have this deck put together for you. They wanted to know things like USB violations. And it was just reminding them of like, hey, and we can go into this more later, but it's like your charter is risk. I'm here to help you address risk. How do I help you adjust risk, which is a business problem, and not sit here and have a conversation about how many people plugged in a USB drive, especially when the average age of the company was 25. I'm like, how many 25-year-olds are walking around with a thumb drive? And we're all Mac shop, and it was USB-C. I'm like, USB-C thumb drives. I'm like, you're 75 as the chair of audit committee. When's the last time you actually looked at tech? And should I call your grandkids to have it explained to you? So she laughed, thankfully. And we had a great relationship ever since then.
So why do you think we're trending in the wrong direction? How do we change that?
Stop being Chicken Little. And yes, I know I talked really loud there. The biggest problem with the security industry is security professionals. We are our own worst enemies. We love FUD. We love leading with, oh my God, if we don't do this, we're going to get breached. Cool. People don't care. How many of you have gotten an email from LastPass? How many, and with like, hey, well, you got credit protection? Or how many of you got an email from AT&T that said, hey, you got credit protection? You looked at it, you went, cool. It's still overlapping with the last breach and the last credit protection I still have. So I don't like. We are so numb to it that it's not a big deal, and that's the wrong conversation to be having with a board because they don't care. They care that you get breached. They don't care that there's a possibility. Like, well, what does that mean? Privacy, any of you privacy professionals out there, and I'm sorry, I will then give up the mic, otherwise I will just keep it. It's like my precious over here. I'm going to pet it for a while. But privacy, if any of you have privacy in your roles of responsibility, pardon the language, but I'm going to do it anyways, get a fucking clue, people. Seriously, learn from security. Stop making all the same mistakes that security make. Stop pitching FUD. No one cares if they get a GDPR fine, because if you look at who's getting fined, it's big social media firms. It's not your local SaaS companies. It's not your local companies. Stop using that as a reason why you have to do privacy. If you're using compliance, if you're using the word security or privacy when you're talking risk, then you probably lost the board when you're having that conversation.
So I just want to add to that. Like I've been around for a while. I've served as an information security officer now 8 times. I have to say I've worked in many different structures. The most important point for me is that I always have a voice. And you make sure that you have a voice with your board. You make sure that you can express your point and you don't get trumped. I will say I spend extra time thinking about those moments you have a voice, because we don't often get a ton of time with the board. So you have to use it wisely. Make sure you have a voice and make sure your reporting structure supports that, and you will have success in your careers.
And I would double down on that and add an experience that we had when we first got a formalized InfoSec program and started having meetings with the executive committee, just the executive risk committee, not the board at this point. We hadn't matured to that level. The conversation from InfoSec to the EC was, here's all this risk. And finally, the CFO literally blew a fuse and said, I eat blanking risk for breakfast. Don't talk to me about risk. It means nothing. And I thought, hold on, I thought that was my job. You know, I go, whoa, what? I had to get aligned with that and understand where he was coming from. What is he actually asking me? He's not asking me about risk. He's asking me about what it means to the bottom line. What's the money value that could be lost here? High risk means nothing. $50 million risk based on these facts means something. And so it was the ability for me to change my mindset and move to, okay, I'm quantifying $50 million, $100 million, whatever, and I'm doing that with facts, okay? Saying these are the reasons I'm saying it's this much loss. Now, I'm only putting that one indicator on the PowerPoint. I have a whole addendum underneath it, and that's the other danger I ran into. You can't go in with more than a slide or two, okay? It just ain't a thing, right? You've got maybe 5 minutes max to do that presentation. It's quick. We've matured a long ways, but that conversation was seminal for me because it taught me really quickly, if I'm going to play at this level, I got to speak their language, not mine, and I've got to do it in a way they can consume it.
You want to go? You want me? Okay, I'll go. So everybody on this panel has a great opportunity for everybody to understand what's going on, but I come from a very, very different organization. We, or me, from a security standpoint, does not report to the board. I report to the CIO, who reports to the CEO, and then he reports to the board. So I have to actually present multiple times to multiple people and have to do it in a different way each time to get buy-in for that risk. So I'm using sports analogies, primarily football for our CEO. Nursing, healthcare, since we're a healthcare organization, I've got to talk to nurses all the time. I'm trying one way or another to beg, borrow, plead, bargain, whatever I can in order to reduce the amount of risk within the organization. And it's a little bit different than everybody else's experiences here. And I'm not sure if you guys have the same experience where you're not able to talk to the board. But basically trying to figure out how to get your point across with them, with the identified risk, is kind of the hardest point for us.
I think we were talking kind of how we communicate risk and deal with it. No two CISO roles are the same on this, and so one, the complaints one might have may not be applicable in another. This is my third CISO role in 3 different sectors now, and where I'm at today, it's a global company divided into 7 major regions with 7 CEOs. So there's the Marsh big CEO, and then there's 7 regional CEOs who are all given marching orders to hit their numbers. Right? That's their risk is hitting their numbers. And so I have 7 risk committees around the planet that I report into. And it's because one single risk committee, there's no way they could digest everything around the planet. And the risk committee guy in the UK doesn't care about the new Chinese data regulations. And it may be an hour's worth of content to cover that. So it's sort of figuring out what's the language of who you're reporting to. And it's different. The UK Risk Committee acts differently than the Asia Risk Committee, which acts differently than the US and Canada. And you got to know what do they like, how they like to see it. UK, I send them a book, an 80-page book, and they read it before the Risk Committee. Our U.S. Risk Committee, hey, Dan, just roll in here and let's go over your stuff, we're going to do a 5-second warm-up before the call, and then we're going to go, right? But you got to figure out what that is and how they process and manage risk and make decisions. And just because I know how accountable they're held to their boss for their numbers, I know they've got to listen, they've got to do something with this. But that's the key, just understanding what's different from place to place. And if you're having trouble communicating with them, I would generally go home and look in the mirror and figure out, what's the difference? What's their language? Because at the end of the day, whether you like their language or not, that's the language that runs the business.
Dan, so who do you report to within Marsh? How does that construct work?
So Marsh you've got this holding company called Marsh McLennan, and then there are 4 big op companies, and Marsh itself is about 55%. So MMC is a $22 billion company. Marsh is $11.5 billion. So I report to the global head of MMC Tech, and so he has a humongous job. I don't know. There's 2,000 people in his organization. So he and I talk on Teams chat a couple times a week, and then one-on-one whenever we can find time. But I mainly work for the Marsh business, so the Marsh COO and the Marsh CIO. Wow. That's mainly who I work for. And if he were to write a performance review today, that's who he would call.
Interesting.
And see what they think.
I mean, this is truly one size does not fit all. I mean, just based on all 5 of you responding. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, one of those things that if you've kind of noticed through this conversation, and it will be the theme as we continue to talk. As you're working your way through your career, and if a C-level role is your aspiration, head of security is your aspiration, one thing you should know here and now is all those certifications that you're spending time working on won't mean crap. All this, your technical skills will play a part because you need to have a conversation, but that may be 5% of your job is actually having those technical conversations. Everything that you need to learn on how to be a CISO, you learned in kindergarten, because that's like the age group of most executives that you're dealing with as they're throwing temper tantrums. But it is that skill set. It's like, what's their win? What do they care about? You should be going and taking finance courses. Your MBA in business is going to do you a much better job than an MBA around IT or security if you're looking at heading down that executive path. The problem is we haven't done anywhere near enough work to mentor people into that next role. So one of the reasons why we don't have enough CISOs reporting to CEOs is there's that expectation of all of a sudden you're now in this role, you should know how to talk to an executive. They still are going to ask you a bunch of technical questions. That's part of their problem as well. They see you as the tech person. They like, well, I'm going to ask you these, like, but that's not what you need to talk about. Risk is not a technical question. Risk is how this applies to the business objectives. What does it do to the company's bottom line, whether you're privately held or publicly held? So if you want to know what skills you need to learn in order to go through and progress your career, it's not, because you've got a lot of smart technical people that you've seen like either go thrown into management roles and then fail out, or you've seen people like they're wholly incompetent. How did they get that job? Well, they're better at bullshit than you are. They know how to talk to an executive better than you do. And so they're going to find those roles. They're going to be given the opportunity to present where you don't, because they've learned to master those soft skills. So more than anything, one of the reasons why we're not sitting at the table is we still haven't figured out how to have that conversation with the COO or the CEO. How do we master that conversation with those people to get them to understand this very technical topic that you may not be doing hands-on work on, but in a way that makes sense to the business? And more than anything else, that's what risk is.
I think let's follow on from that. So, when I'm looking at the current landscape in terms of being a chief information security officer at a company, there's litigation and potential criminal charges looming over every CISO at all times, right? We've seen that in the news lately. I mean, we were talking about that just a little while ago. I equate that to, if I am the senior security person in an organization, my number one goal is to find out who is the ultimate risk acceptance authority in that organization and become their best friend. Just want to hear from the panelists in terms of what's your take in your current situation on that?
So there's definitely a conversation that has to precede your engagement with your leadership. And that's one where you've got to step back and look at the organization and decide, is the organization aligned properly when it comes to risk acceptance? The way I always phrase it, and I inherited this conversation from my boss, which is, who's eating the Twinkies and who's gaining the weight? Okay? If your development group is eating all the Twinkies and security's over here getting fat, there's a problem with alignment, right? You know, they can eat all the Twinkies they want. It doesn't matter. They're incurring all this technical debt because they're writing code fast, pushing it to prod, and it's out there gleaming with vulnerabilities. Security can't fix that. Sure, they can find it, but they can't own that, right? So that alignment conversation is something you need to start early. And when I started with my current role or with Nuskin, there was no organization called InfoSec. It didn't exist. And so it's been this process of growing that organization and starting to bring that alignment into place. It's not mature yet, it's going there, but I think every organization has to take that conversation to heart, and then they can go talk to their senior risk leader and say, hey, guess what? We got to change that Twinkie to weight relationship in these areas.
Anyone else want to take a stab at that one? Jeff?
Yeah, CYA. Document everything as part of the litigation piece. You want to make sure that you document not every communication, but a lot of the communication between you and the executives that you're dealing with, saying, hey, I brought this up, I brought the risk up, you approved the risk, we followed the correct processes and procedures. That's really the only way you're going to be able to protect yourself in that point.
That's a great point. And I would just add one thing. It's subjective, right? What's risk tolerance is a subjective thing, but it's, I like the point about who's going to do this, who's on the hook for it, and then how is it documented, and are we talking about an exception, which hopefully this is a temporary issue you're going to fix, where often acceptance means someone just made a decision that they're gonna roll the dice and they're gonna see if they can kind of drive a boat with a hole in the hull across a lake, and see if they make it, and that's what you kind of want to ask yourself. Who's taking the heat for this, right? And that's what's fun in a not funny way about where I work is they love pushing those decisions down as far as possible. And so it's interesting the numbers of people that I have to deal with who they get tagged as a risk owner, and that's the one who made the decision, and they have all the follow-ups and have to report back anything that happens. So it's interesting, but documenting the heck out of everything is important.
Yeah, I think I'm going to add to that. I'm going to share a war story. When I was the anti-terrorism officer at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, I reported the installation commander, which is the senior most military person on that base. I got the job. I arrived a week later. A report was sent to me by the Joint Staff of the U.S. military, and they had done an integrated vulnerability assessment of the base. They found glaring issues, vulnerabilities across the base. So I got this 20, 30-page report. I compiled it. There was about 4 or 5 major, like critical vulnerabilities is what they call it. I rolled those up into a good executive summary. I brought it into the wing commander. I said, sir, got some issues here in the Jasiva that just went down. He says, I accept the risk. He didn't even look at it, right? So I said, okay, no problem. So I left the office. The next morning, I had scheduled an office call with him. First second he got in the office, I had an Air Force memorandum all laid out with his signature block on it, outlining every single vulnerability. And I got in his office, I didn't say a word. I slid it across his desk. He flipped it over, and he looked at it. He actually read this time. He's like, I'm not accepting this. I said, someone's got to accept the risk here. Do you want me to elevate this to Air Combat Command, to your boss's boss, or what would you like me to do? He signed it real quick. He said, mitigate the vulnerabilities. I think that's an example that I took earlier on in my career, and I've gone into every organization that I've essentially served in from the perspective of you got to figure out who that risk acceptance authority is, and you need to make that person your best friend, because if you don't, that risk is going to end up, like Dan said, being delegated down to you, likely. And then guess what happens? It gets litigious, you go to jail, whatever, right? I don't go to jail. It's not real fun. I've been in jails before. On the law enforcement side, I don't want to end up on the criminal side. So from my perspective, I mean, to me, that's how I view things from that perspective. Any other thoughts on that before we kind of shift a little bit here? So economy, budgets. I know that in the tech industry, my company, I'll just say it's the great level set going on right now in technology, in my opinion. I've been talking to recruiters from the standpoint of they're my friends. For the record, I'm not trying to leave Lenovo. I've heard essentially what happened is the tech industry's level setting right now. And what that's doing is level setting what I've seen in the industry in terms of hiring, salaries, et cetera, from the perspective of you would have security developers making $650,000 a year full comp in some companies, and now they're making $180,000 in base salary plus some RSUs and such. So I think there is a level setting going on from my perspective, where I'm sitting in the technology industry. But interested in hearing from the panel what you're seeing from your perspectives.
So I am the crusher of dreams. So I actually teach grad school, and I was telling everybody, the first question I ask everybody in the first day of class is, what are your salary expectations? When they think that they're getting, multiple 6 figures, I tell them, by the way, you are a grad student, you have 0 work experience, you're not even making 6 figures. Welcome to reality. And I think that's good. That's a big eye opener for a lot of people, especially my students, because then all hell breaks loose after that. And then we have to build them up and say, hey, you do have the ability to get to that point, but you have to follow a certain path and actually put in the work to do it. I think, a year, 2 years ago, a lot of people were basically getting right out of high school, college, depending on their experience, making outrageous money. And now what you're saying is the level set is, and it's coming down hard, and some people are living beyond their means, and that's getting a little crazy. So good luck. But again,
that's not really what I was looking for. We need some encouragement here, a little bit of mentorship, something like that. We're all screwed, is what you said, right?
No, I mean, no. No. But I mean, I think the comment was made, some of your certifications aren't going to be there for you, but I think certifications are important as you get to that point, as you try to get up to the CISO role. They are going to get you in the door, okay? Whether you use them or not, it's getting in the door is the priority.
So I just want to add to that, and maybe a little bit more positive side. I have to say, I had a dear friend one time who told me that my secret power was saying yes, which is really rare for a CISO responsibility to have your secret power being yes, right? I always looked for the way that I could say yes, the way that I could sit down, explain risk, and communicate how to say yes. And yes served me very well in my career. You know, when so I was a University of Utah graduate, and I went right into a manager trainee program at Citi. And it was a super intense program. People cried. I'm just saying. It was intense, but I kept saying yes, and I kept pushing myself further. I moved a lot. I didn't stay in Utah. Got a call from a recruiter, and they said, "We'll double your annual salary right now." And I said, "I'm packing my bag," right? And I packed my bag and I moved. I spent some time with Capital One, and I acquired a lot of companies on their behalf and assessed risk like crazy. I kept saying yes. That is the way that I drove my career forward, and that I drove the salary that I did, because my senior executive said, "Jami, are you willing?" And I said yes before he finished his statement. Right? Yes, I will learn that. Yes, I will get that certification. Yes, I will do more. Yes, I will teach this team. I disagree a little bit with my peers. I think my certifications have served me very well. I preach certifications so much to where I have said the reason I have had low turnover on my teams is because it's not just about what I need from them. I invest in my people. I fight for their training skills. I push them to limits that they didn't think they could achieve, and we have success together. So I'm spinning it a little bit positively. Right out of school, just keep saying yes and keep pushing yourself. Cyber is not an easy job. I'm sure all of us in this room realize that. But if you're up for it, it can be a very positive, lucrative career.
And just for clarification, as a CISO, your certifications will get you through the door. But after that point, like, just let them lapse. Like, you got plenty of other things you can go do. You're just gonna just go like screw it all. Just like, I got so many vendor meetings I'm on. How many? I see some vendors staring at me down there because they know they're like, hey, I'm gonna get you on my list to have a meeting. You're having those technical conversations. You're guiding your team through that process. So currently going through, certifications are critical for you. Whether it's a technical role, whether it's a non-technical role, and yes, there are non-technical roles in security because security is not about technology. But ultimately, where you need to drive, you need to understand your business acumen. Go take an accounting course. One of the reasons why we're seeing that decrease in that great level set is let's talk finances for a moment. Valuations were 17x two and a half years ago. That meant a non-public company, if they had $10 million in ARR, $10 million in revenue, they were being valued at $170 million. You had companies like Wiz that went from 10 million to 100 million in less than a year, which set a Guinness Book of World Record that they're a cloud security cloud security posture management company. And they were then being valued at over $1 billion, and they actually got like a Series C at, I think their Series C was 470 million.
Wow.
Well, that's great. That also means they gave away most of their own equity, and so it's going to take them a long time. So most of their, and this is something to think about when you're going into a company. Have they given away the bank? Have they given away the stock option? And you're like, well, why does this matter? As you're negotiating your salary, what is that company actually worth? Are you a mortgage versus Madrick? Mortgage meaning you want higher base salary versus RSUs or options. What does an option mean versus an RSU? And you're like, again, I know we're at a security conference, but this is the stuff you need to be paying attention to, because this is what's going to drive your career forward, other than just you have technical skills. Being able to have the right conversations with people as you're going in the door. Understanding their fiscal viability, because there's a lot of people right now. How many layoffs? How many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have been laid off in the tech industry in the last year? Great. Things were good for a long time, and as they went down, There are a lot of people impacted by it. There are a lot of people like, hey, they got promised these really low base salaries, but they got a crap ton of the options of these companies and then got laid off. And they don't have the funds to go purchase those options, and those options actually aren't worth anything. So this is paying attention to the certifications, 100% believer in building your team. You've got to have that, and if you should be asking, if you're looking for a new job, like, what is the company's commitment? Like, what is my budget to actually go get certifications and maintain certifications? Should be one of your interview questions. What was the last time you promoted from within? Should be another one of those interview questions. Understanding that whole culture that they have of, hey, we're going to just keep bringing people from outside who are going to make twice as much money as you did when you started 3 years ago, but we're going to give you a 5% increase year over year and tell you to be grateful and suck it up because you have a job. So this is where those business acumen skills are really important, because at the end of the day, it is a job. It is not your life. Security is my passion. It's my love. Where I work is my job. They pay my bills. They're allowing me to retire here in a few years. That's what your job is. Understand that. Understand where it all ties in together, and not just about the technical stuff, because that's how we get hosed, and then you're going to be in a leadership role. The statistics on CISOs is it's an average tenure of 2. Most CISOs burn out after the second time and then do new fields because they're not prepared for it. They're not mentored. They're not given, and I don't mean just by the security people, they're not mentored by the other business leaders as well about what it takes to be an executive. So burn out quick. If that's your path, understand that's what you're getting into. I had my own succession plan. I've been training her and putting her in front of the board, putting her in front of the executive team, because she's like, yeah, this is where I want to be a CISO. I want to be a CISO. After doing that for the last 3 years, she's like, cool. My career path is no longer CISO. She's like, I'm good to be a deputy CISO, maybe an ISO. She's like, I actually don't want your job. She's like, I can't, like, after seeing what's involved, she's like, that is not my strengths and skill set. So you pay attention to it, take the opportunity to make sure you get in front of leadership, senior leadership and the board as often as you can, especially if you're in a senior role in your company and you're looking down that path, because, again, it's not the technical skills. It is your soft skills.
I had a great conversation with our CFO because I was asking him about, what do you expect of me? You know, what do you expect of this InfoSec capability to report up to you? And he said, I want you to understand our quarterly reports and our annual report. Okay, it's a public company. And he expects me, the owner of InfoSec, to understand all the detail that's in that annual report. Okay? Because that's the language he speaks. That's what he wants me to understand. So, I was so grateful for that kind of feedback, and that's the mentoring he's talking about, is if you can solicit that kind of mentoring from those key leaders in your organization, at whatever level you're at right now, just start to solicit that kind of feedback and understand what they're looking for. Because if you want to grow your career in that direction, they're the ones you got to impress.
Just a quick kind of recap, just like for the younger crew building career, Jami said something really important about saying yes. Be willing, first off, to take a new job, because if you really want to promote and you want to get more money, it sucks to change jobs. It sucks to move sometimes, but it will work for you if you're willing to do it and commit to it. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if your aspiration is to seriously grow and get promoted and do things, it makes a big difference. I've done it myself. I can tell. It sounds like from Jami, it's worked as well. In the meantime, though, while you're coming up, get to know your company. How's the company doing? Is the company doing well? Is it not doing well? What's the future for you at that company? What does the company's future look like? And then learn what skills don't you have that you think your company could use. Talk to your boss. Say, hey, what do you think the team's going to look like in a year or in 2 years or in 3 years? Should I do something else? Should I learn something else? And don't be afraid to talk to other managers on other teams in the company. You'll learn a lot about what's going on and start developing. I would say early in your career, it's cool to be beholden to your company. But I would say those first 10, 15 years of your career, be beholden to your career and developing your craft. And then for the leaders who are building teams, like with the economy and the downturn and what's happening, I don't know, like a global company, what I hired a brand new team last year. It was my first year. I hired 10 people in 8 months in 5 countries. And it was brutal, but I had to do it because I knew, coming back to for-profit, I better get them all hired in 2022, because 2023 they're going to start off the year and freeze everything, because that's what we do, right? And so when you have opportunities to hire people, get them hired. Don't do whatever homework you have to do, whatever vetting you have to do. And then with your team, you need to be doing that same investigating. Can I upskill people I have? Can I find people who are flexible, can cross over, because you're going to lose people. Someone's going to leave, and you can't backfill them. I got a huge relief. Awesome guy, recruited in Mexico City a year ago. Google came in, offered him a ton of money, and are moving him to Spain. There's nothing I'm going to do about that. And I was wildly relieved that his position backfill got approved right away. I was expecting them to say no. But think about those things. But I had been telling people for the whole time he was here all the awesome things he did. So prop up your team. Don't filter everything through you. Make sure your boss and everybody else knows how great the people on your team are by name. Because when one of them leaves, then it's easier to discuss why you want to replace them. If your boss and none of your boss's peers have ever heard of the person, well, were they even working here? And so keep that in mind. You're always thinking ahead. What's going to happen? Kind of planning forward.
Really like that tack you took, and I want to add to that. Don't get in. The older folks here get it. Don't get in the assumption that everything always stays the same, right? I have had up to 30. I think we had 32 people at one point in our department. We went down to 15, and we're back up to 22. Okay, this was all economically driven, departure driven, that kind of stuff. People get a good opportunity, they take off. Especially as you get into a leadership role in InfoSec, don't plan on stasis. It doesn't happen, okay? The company changes economic conditions constantly. The world changes economic conditions constantly, and your people are looking for interesting opportunities. And if it's not in your company, it's going to be somewhere else. So, plan on, I love Jamie's comment about growing people. That's awesome. We do that really well. Unfortunately, sometimes we have a hard time growing them and then compensating them as good as they should be, because they get really good. And then they're, going, the guy next door is looking really nice. And that happens. But invest in your people, but understand you shouldn't be expecting stasis.
Yeah. I think I would just recap by saying that in hindsight, had I known what I know now 30 years ago, I'd probably be in a much different situation. I'd probably be that architect that I was looking at being in high school. Anyway, I think Dan made a very, very important point. And I think Steve had mentioned it earlier around, like, we're our own worst enemy in the security profession. Do your due diligence on the company. They're doing their due diligence on you, but do the due diligence. I think understanding the company's culture is critical. I think the current company I'm with actually has the most fantastic culture I've ever seen in my entire career, because I did the due diligence to understand that, and I interviewed them as much as they interviewed me. And I think that's why I was able to make that decision, because I had many other options back in 2019, but I chose this company because they were meeting my criteria for what I was expecting in terms of my peers, my teams, the company's culture. I think one thing I would actually add is that what I saw is, and I've got tons of friends in the technology space. And to Dan's point, if 2023 is coming, 2024 is coming, there's going to be headcount freezes and budget cuts. It's just the way it is. It's the new normal right now since COVID, especially in technology, because we saw this massive influx or uptick in terms of sales from a technology perspective, and now that's dried up, and that's causing conflict within the technology industry. But keep your network warm, because my friends were not expecting to get laid off, and now a couple of them have been 6-8 months laid off. They cannot find positions. Keep your network warm. Get on LinkedIn. Don't just get on LinkedIn when an emergency hits. Get on LinkedIn and promulgate that network and ensure that it's warm. For the sales guys, read my LinkedIn article on sales, because I literally block and delete most sales calls. I've taken 3 in the last 6 months because of the approach. Look at the approach differently in terms of reaching out to us. I think that's critical as well. I'm happy to talk offline on that one. I won't get too far into that. I don't want to get killed by Kim.
One thing real quick, also be involved in organizations outside of work. I'm going to give a shout out to Stephanie Jasper at Netscope and the work that she does with, and Stephanie, I apologize if I get this wrong, but I believe it's the Women of Cybersecurity Denver chapter. Just get involved in stuff like that. Have those networking opportunities and those peer groups. Be involved. You've got people who have that reputation of being the mentors and being the people who are trying to drive not just the cybersecurity, but trying to drive the diversity, having that extra edge. And it's not just because she's doing this to drive her next work, because she's been in Netscope for a while now. It's because she's got the passion for it, she's got the work. So finding something that you're passionate about and turning that into something that makes you a differentiator in the market as well, awesome. I know, totally random, but just throwing in those other groups that you can be involved in, the ISC Square, the SACAs, things like that, where you can be involved in any chapter leadership. Being involved in any other type of external organizations related is also really good when it comes to differentiating yourself within the candidate pool as you're looking for your next career.
I mean, you're like I said earlier, you're your own salesperson, you're your own marketer. Carve your brand out as a professional. Let's switch gears real quick. Let's talk. I was going to try to keep going and not talk about AI, but I think we need to have Dan kind of shape this a little bit. So Dan, I'm going to kind of let you kind of frame this a little bit. I feel like what we were talking about earlier is actually critical to hear, because I think it was an important topic.
I don't know how I'll frame this, but I mean, it's so I think all of us, predictive AI, like all the vendors over there are going to tell you something about how predictive AI helps their tools work. We've been doing that for a long time, right? And the curveball that's come recently is the generative AI, and I think the reason it's such a concern is, people compare it to blockchain, and I tell people, don't compare it to blockchain. It's not the same. I said blockchain didn't end up being a tool anybody could run and do stuff with, because most people didn't know how it worked. But generative AI now was something anybody can use. And I said from an organizational standpoint, from our perspective as security people, well, where's it going? What are you putting in there? And so I think with Marsh, we're a global risk advisory company, and we advise our clients on everything. They want to know, anything from floods, fires, banking failures, geopolitical risk, climate change, cybersecurity attacks. Oh, and will I lose to my competitors if I don't use generative AI? Or will I go down in flames if I use it? And so we've had to internally, and we've spun up, I'm like on a steering committee that just oversees generative AI POCs, and because we have so many going. But I think for your company, kind of ask the question, what does it mean to our company? Does somebody think it's a competitive advantage, and why? Or why not? Because the first thing, there's the things we can do and then the things we should do, right? And I think sometimes it's one of those things that's so cool because everybody can use it. They think since the company can, they just want to go do it without asking if they should. And from our CEO said, hey, I don't know if we should, but we should have a take on it because all of our clients are asking us. They expect us to know everything about everything. And so we've got to learn how it works so we can speak about it. But I think the key thing, long game, we could talk for hours about structure and use and bias and things like that. But I think the key thing is just within your company, ask, okay, I know we can, has someone decided we should, and then follow your normal policies. At the end of the day, the policy is the policy. This isn't any different than loading stuff up to Box or Dropbox or anything else. It's think of it the same way. Don't make it overly complicated. Talk to the network team. They have these tools get updated to find things that look like a generative AI or a search engine, and you can block those. I hope you can. I can. So, just think that to try to keep it simple though. You know, try to keep it simple. Don't get wowed by all these cool things that they want to do. And if you can talk them into buying internal tools, and you can be sure it's all in your own little sandbox inside your own walls, great. You know, rock and roll. But that's the thing, is try to keep it simple, and then talk about the can versus should. You know, because that's I think where maybe we'll get into trouble.
Just piggyback on that. I have a good friend, associate, works for a $46 billion insurance company. Generative AI became a thing. All of a sudden it starts getting used in their environment. They start analyzing that kind of use, realize the source code's going into it, that other, you know, because people are going, hey, this will write code for me, this is cool, you know, and it is cool. But nonetheless, they were going into it from that perspective. So the interesting take on this is they spent 2 weeks with their legal counsel group, dozens of attorneys, the InfoSec group, the GRC group, and they wrote this massive policy about the use of generative AI. And I got a copy of that and read through it. And I didn't find anything in my, you know, as a cursory review, but I didn't see anything in there that wasn't probably already covered in their acceptable use policy, their standard policies for data security. All of that was probably already covered. They just needed to make everyone aware, yes, this is a new technology. You are still bound by our company policies. Please follow those. But they probably spent $1 million in resources building a new policy. So, you know, it's just technology, guys. Yeah, it's pretty powerful, but you just need to adopt it or not adopt it based on the company's need to use.
Anyone else want to add to that or no? I don't know where Kim is at. Do we want to take a few questions? I think that might not be a bad idea. And then I think I'm going to kind of go around the horn and wrap it up because we're about 15 minutes out. Kim, are you in the room? No? She departed. Okay. Just, I'm not going to pass the mic around. Just if you want to shout, just kind of stand up. You know, if you've got questions, I mean, let's get them knocked out. I'd love to hear from you guys.
How do you handle unreal expectations? How do you handle unreal expectations? Like, you know, AI is a buzzword, right? So I'll sit in a lot of meetings and everybody thinks it's a miracle problem solver to things that they don't understand.
So I got a new hobby a couple years ago when we had some conversations at the board level. Hey, we need to be zero trust.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so my new hobby was taking 800.207 and dissecting it and figuring out what that actually meant, because they had no idea, right? They didn't even know NIST had a publication on it. And so I dissected that, and I've now got a new hobby. I go and speak on the topic because guess what, folks? It isn't that simple, and it's not a thing, you know? I think AI is the same concept. You need to become, if you've got people asking the question, you need to become the expert.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have an educated response that details it out in a way that they say, oh, okay, it's deeper than I thought. And then you can explain to them how it can benefit the company. Like AI has some really powerful stuff, especially internal generated stuff where you're doing analysis heuristically on, you know, if you think about just the zero trust concept, policy enforcement points. You start doing heuristic analysis, feeding that into an AI engine that can then consume that over time. That becomes very powerful. But, you know, are we doing that? No. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to approach that is always be learning. Always be researching what's coming out, what's new, and being able to respond to them immediately when they have that first question, so you can head them off at the pass and go, you know, it's not as simple as that, you know, it's not as dangerous, or, you know, actually educate them on the basics of AI, and then you have the ability to steer that conversation going forward.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I'm curious, as we go into budget season, what you would recommend the appropriate percentage of a company's revenue should be spent on InfoSec.
You can tell that's the question that we all get.
0%. 0% should be spent on InfoSec, as much money as possible on addressing risk. And that again, this is where your mind, you're addressing InfoSec. In the executive team's mind, they're addressing risk. So how are you framing that question? So there's a lot of data out there. There is no data that shows that there is a number that is a sweet spot for a company, because it all depends on the company's risk appetite. It depends on their industry. And I know we use the "it depends" question a lot, but it's accurate in this scenario. So I don't have a percentage to give you, but how are you tying the risks that you're addressing to the company objectives that resonate with the company? That if you're a public company, how are you like, hey, if we don't address this, this has this X potential on impacting percentages of our bottom line, so therefore our stock prices, we lose X millions of dollars, blah, 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 blah. I know that's a very technical term, blah, 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 blah. You can feel free to use it and coin it if you want. But that's what you're trying to drive, and that's the discussion is, this is what's critical for us. This is the win. How are you getting those organizations to take on the things that are important for you to be able to drive that forward? Because ultimately, you're going to be asking people to allocate resources in their own organization to not do something that's on their list to address because you need something out of them. So if you don't have that win defined, so it's not even your own budget, if you don't have that win defined for them, you're never going to get that work done. You're never going to get the board on board to help drive that risk within inside an organization. So again, it depends, because it's the risk you're addressing.
So he recovered from that 0%, made me feel a little bit better. But I just want to add, if you are having that conversation about that percentage for the first time during budget season, you're already losing. You need to have that conversation every day and every opportunity you have to be selling the benefits that you offer your organization and how you're mitigating risk every day, so that by the time you're sitting at that table for a hard budget discussion, they know what risks they're willing to accept, and they fight for you harder than you need to fight for you.
And that same CFO that I talked about earlier gave me another nugget. And that nugget was, I don't care what my peers do. I care what matters to us, okay? Because we were going down that road and saying, well, in our industry, X, Y, and Z company does X percent. He said, I don't care. I care what matters to us. What is our capability versus what our risk is?
And just want like a practical thing, in terms of, like, all of us know what our security program has and doesn't have, the things we haven't been doing. Often, if those things you're not doing are important, they get caught up in internal audit findings, things like that. And so some things that are really hard to get kind of eventually have their day. So I like what Jami said, but then adding on to that, there may be some things you've got to play a long game for. Identity and access management, getting a new government, identity governance platform, because it's brutal to explain a business case on that, right? But if eventually it becomes the thing that's on every single audit as a high-risk finding, but to Jami's point, when you're always on point telegraphing, then eventually the people are going to look dumb when they don't give you the money for that. So,
great answers.
Do we have any other questions? I actually have a question for the panel, but we'll take one more before I ask them our wrap-up question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I understand this idea of pitching risk to the executives, but I've had pushback where we've identified maybe some gaps and want to get a tool in place to address those gaps or to mitigate that risk. But then their argument is, well, don't we have a tool that mitigates risk for cyber? And it's kind of like, well, yes, but this tool approaches risk totally different. So how do you, I guess, translate that to a meaningful conversation with them versus just, you want another tool that does the same thing that all your other tools do, which mitigates risk, yes, but there's all these avenues we're trying to protect against.
I'll take a quick stab because I've actually had that conversation, and good to see you again. The model that we've taken is trying to work with that key individual. Now, it didn't used to be our risk committee chairman on the board or chairperson on the board. It used to be down at the CFO level. So we started selling at the CFO level. Getting the CFO kind of tit for tat. I needed to understand the annual report. He needed to understand our IT ecosystem, that threat surface. Now, I stopped describing it as threat surface. You know, I said, look, here's all of the IT environment that we have. This is what supports our ability to make money. We have the coverage in these areas. We're blind in these areas. Okay? So I broke it down at that level. It made a whole lot better sense to him when I said blind and observable, and broke it down that way. So that way he says, well, why can't this tool do that? It doesn't do that. We need a tool to do that. We might find one that does both, you know, but we need to do a bake-off and look at it, but I need budget. So.
And I'm going to add on this and then go back to, again, Jami's comment about every day, but make sure you're communicating these things and then tracking what you don't do and don't have. If it's the MITRE ATT&CK framework, that might be a little too much to swallow for some, but it's a great reference. If you want to go shade in the boxes, hey, we've got this, list out what they do and what they don't, and the areas you're not covered, if people agree it's a material risk, then you're starting to build a case for it.
Data trumps opinion. Had a COO say that on a podcast that I was on here recently, is data trumps opinion. If you can't provide metrics, not matrix, I'm not going to take the red pill or blue pill, but if you can't provide data to back up what you're saying, then you're literally just giving your opinion. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, is they know it in their head, they don't know how to articulate it. The way you're going to articulate it is you're going to find how you're going to document that risk. I actually have boiled all my metrics down to 3 core pieces. I'm not going to get into this now, but if you have questions, more than happy to discuss, because ultimately I figured out, after working with boards for the past 20 years, these are the things that made sense to them. But you've got to have the data to back it up. If you're coming in with just a slide deck that says, well, I want this tool, and here's where it differentiates against these other tools, or here's how I'm going to replace it, they don't care. If you're down talking about the tool itself, again, you've lost the discussion. You're not going to get funding. You have to have the data. You're talking about how you're addressing and how you're moving the company forward, how you're being a progressive individual, how you're driving the company in the correct direction towards those objectives, because it's ultimately not about the tool itself.
So I have one final wrap-up question. Skip's heard me ask this question in the past, but first of all, how about a big round of applause to all of our sponsors? There's no way we could be here today without them. So this question is actually on behalf of the sponsors, because we all know it's very hard to get in front of all of you.
I carve out 15 minutes. I spend 15 minutes of time. My schedule is 15 minutes, so it doesn't matter what meeting it is, it's 15 minutes. I carved out 15 minutes for him at the end of the day. I ended up talking to him for an hour and a half, because we talked about everything but what he was selling. I scheduled another call with him. I had another deep dive. Fantastic conversation. I said, show me what you got. I ended up handing him off to 2 of in my network, not within my company, but 2 of my network contacts, because what he had to offer was fantastic in terms of a data center solution. So I would say develop the relationship rather than, like, here's the example, right? I've gotten 4 of these today. LinkedIn message, so-and-so wants to connect with you. And the next thing I know, I go check my Outlook at work, and that same person found my Lenovo.com address, and now I have 15 pieces of collateral sitting in my inbox. Absolute, will not connect with you, will not respond to messages. You get auto-deleted into my junk folder. That's how I operate. I think this is about relationship building, right? You're selling, regardless of whether you're a professional salesperson or not. Social engineer me a little bit, right? Make me at least feel good about taking a call. And I mean, I probably speak for everyone here. I work 12 to 14 hours a day. I mean, that's just normal for me, and usually 6 days a week. My time is very, very precious to me. And if you want to build a relationship, I'm all for it. Reach out to me. I'll come play golf with you, whatever you want to do. But that's how I operate. That's sort of my viewpoint.
Second that, but if I get a cold call, you're already in the hole. okay? I got a real problem with cold calls on my phone. That's the most disruptive way to hit me during the day. Because if I'm like any of these guys, I'm generally in meetings all freaking day, all right? I get my work done in the evening, you know? So that's where the 12 to 14-hour days happen. So I'm actually doing work after work hours because during work I'm generating the need. Okay, I'm working with the teams, I'm figuring out what they need, I've got to figure out what I've got to communicate back, and I build that out. So if it's a cold call during the day, you know, sorry guys, but that just puts you in the back hole for me. If it's a nicely phrased connection on LinkedIn, I definitely reply to those. I definitely will communicate and get something going, and then I'll tell you how I want to communicate. You know, I'll state it and say, this is what I would like from you. And if that vendor follows that process, I can guarantee I will sit through a demonstration of that product. Now, it may not have play, but I'll at least sit through it.
Well, just real quick, even though my family time, I make fun of all of our government agencies, but the CIA guy's presentation, that was it. And you can ask my kids, if you see my LinkedIn, and don't any of you vendors try this because I'm giving you I'm giving it away right now. But you look on it and you say, hey Dan, tell me about that F-350 and fifth wheel on your profile. I mean, my family will tell you I'll talk to anybody about my truck and my camper and my boat and stuff like that. But to that point, get to know people, and if you connect with them in a way, even if you don't get business, you'll have somebody that you trust and will answer when you call or reply when you write.
Are you sure? Yeah, you can go ahead. Okay. My ego says I should go first anyways. So. Actually, for all the salespeople in the room, I want to say thank you. If you've never tried doing a sales job, you do not know how hard it is and how hard they hustle to get things closed. They're the reason why we have revenue. And the engineers are like, well, we're doing it. Yeah, it's both. You have to have a product that's worth selling, but I'm a former noveller. That's why I ended up moving to Utah in the first place. You can have the greatest product in the world, but if it doesn't sell, you have no money and you're going to lose your job. So salespeople, thank you. You guys have a thankless job. You get crapped on all the time by people about how you're contacting. And as you're going to hear, there's not a real right way other than a couple of things. Yeah, don't be creepy. I'm going to apologize again. Like sending dick pics and LinkedIn, which does happen. Steve. You would be amazed at the stuff that happens. Like, don't be that kind of salesperson. It's like I have a friend, she is the CISO at a billion-dollar company that regularly gets those in her LinkedIn inbox. So don't do that. Don't use FUD. Don't just because a breach happened, like, okay, great, we just had the Discord and then Tesla and inbox getting blown up of like, oh, if they had used our product, this would have never happened. We all know that's a load of crap. So don't use FUD. You just drive us away with that. We know you're full of crap if you're saying that you could have solved it with a silver bullet. Don't be creepy. Be genuine. Like actually do some research on us behind the scenes. You are social engineering us because our natural inclination is we don't want to talk to you. And by the way, you don't speak for me. I didn't work 12-hour and 14-hour days or 6 days a week because I had to set the example to my team that it's okay to walk away from work. Yeah. And so it was like, it's a 9-hour day and then I'm done. And unless it's an emergency or unless we're in a breach, I'm not responding until the next day. I also stopped sending emails in the evening because even though my team heard that like, hey, I don't need you to respond to this, they still had that anxiety that came through. So I started using scheduling for Slack and for Gmail to start sending emails the first thing in the morning. But yeah, just be good human beings. But thank you for all the hard work on sales.
You want to go first?
I'm going to, yeah, that's, I'm really happy he went first. So I have a few do's and don'ts. I'm going to start with the don'ts. Don't schedule a meeting without even talking to me. Number one, I just see random invites show up and I'm not going to accept them. I'm not going to decline them. I'm just going to leave them as they sit. And then you send me an email and say, why didn't you join? I'm like, because we haven't said one word to each other before. The do's on that side, though, do reach out via LinkedIn. Anything outside of email usually works a lot better because there's so much email going on. You have the ability to talk about, hey, any of my posts, any of my, common connections, any of my interests. Start taking a look at those. Those are probably the best entryways into that. Also, if you're going to say, hey, we're going to give you a gift card, I don't need the gift card. If you're going to give a gift card or something, say, hey, we're going to do something for your team. That will go a lot further than saying it's going to come to me, because those guys do all the work. So that's
That's awesome. I'm going to actually say I took some advice from my dad years ago when he said, Jami, always remember that people are lazy. I use that in my work life, I use that in my personal life, and I would recommend it to vendors. Make my life easier. Make it easy for me. Convince me in minutes why your product is the one that I should buy. Make it easy for me to understand how I'm going to sell this to my CEO and get him to write the check, right? Just keep it easy. Don't say you want to sit me through an hour-long presentation and I'm still left with many, many questions. Just make it easy, because people are inherently lazy.
It's true.
Thank you all. And I know you all work long, long hours, and I appreciate, very honored from FutureCon that you guys came and spent the whole day with us. And we know you're busy. And everyone in the audience, thanks for having us here and letting us educate you guys. So thank you all for being here, and thanks for the panelists. And that is a wrap. We're going to do our prizes now. So the bar's open. If anyone wants a drink, it's still open, but we have a lot of prizes to give away. So thank you all.